We're ready.
Okay, let me tell you the instructions that I was given. Simply put, pick a topic that won't have been already exhausted, buried, unburied, reburied by the long-winded panelists before you, and see if you can deal with it in a short period, 15 minutes. But most important of all, when you conclude, make sure you tell them the cocktails will be immediately served in the adjoining room with hors d'oeuvres. And if you do that and you stop short of your full time limit, they'll applaud you for now enabling them to get over to the cocktail lounge. Okay, now what am I going to talk about? My premise is that a significant portion of M&A activity may spring from hedge fund engagements, okay? And here are the leading hedge fund activists. Now this is just the first 6 of them, but you'll notice they go from Elliott Management, which has assets under management of $72 billion. That's a pretty big number, comparable to old-fashioned takeover bidders. Then it goes down quickly. Now some of these people are no longer around. Pershing Square is out of this field. Carl Icahn is getting a little bit older and a little bit less active. So we get down to 10. By the time we get down to 10, we're down to assets under management of only $3.3 billion. Meaning this is a small world of a limited number of actors. And if you see these activist hedge funds, as some of my colleagues do, as the police force of market efficiency, it's a pretty small police force that's being stretched a little thin. Okay. Elliott stands alone, size falls off, and it's a small world with only a few significant players. Okay. Now, if I get the next slide up. Okay. Let's look at the proxy outcomes for the last 5 years. Now I'm going to define winner in a special way. Winner means that at least one director was elected in a proxy contest, not that a majority of the board was obtained. Also, only proxy contests that go to a vote count are going to be counted in this list. And thus we have activists winning 34 or 27%, but that's 27% defining success as getting even one director elected, and that may not be enough success to do anything significant. All right. Management, however, gets 64% success, meaning that no one has been elected who is a nominee of the insurgents. All right. And the total campaigns come to 125. Now, there were more campaigns than that started, but this is the ones that actually went to a vote, weren't called off with a settlement over maybe one nominee. All right. Consensual appointments of a new director, even though they may show some kind of victory, don't count. We're looking at proxy contests that actually are won. And we find, by the way, that the vast majority of contests are settled by a private negotiation well in advance of the vote count. Okay, but when it does go to a proxy vote, the insurgents, the activists, seldom win. It's a very small number where they win, and not take it one step further. Here are our big 3, okay? And notice how similar some of the votes are. There have been 59 proxy contests in which BlackRock was involved, 59 in which Vanguard was involved, and State Street lagged well behind with 1 less. Very similar numbers, okay? Now, how many times did the activists succeed in electing at least one director? Oh, we find that BlackRock 21 times, State Street 14 times, Vanguard 20 times. So Vanguard, BlackRock, same number of proxy contests, and one difference, 21 versus 20, in the number of single directors. Rather similar parallel pattern. But now here's the statistic that may surprise you. When did the big 3 vote for the entire activist slate? Over this 5-year period, BlackRock did it twice. State Street did it 5 times, and Vanguard was just prolific. It voted for the entire slate 6 times, a little bit less than 10%. Okay. And by the way, the slates that they voted for pretty much match the IS and Glass Lewis slates. Now that's not surprising because most of those votes will be votes of no. We're voting against, and Glass Lewis and ISS generally vote no also. Okay, now let's take this one step further. Well, I'm going to try to get one step further. Okay. New developments. Last week, President Trump indicated that he will issue an executive order on proxy advisors. Not give it to the SEC. No, he isn't going to bother with agencies anymore. He's going to give you direct executive orders. While there are multiple versions of the proposed rules circulating, and they sometimes appear to be quite different, the White House may be leaning towards either one, rules requiring that proxy advisors not make actual voting recommendations, but only give general advice, or two, not make recommendations where they receive fees from both the funds they advise and the corporate issuer. And that appears to be a not insubstantial number of times when fees are coming from both sides. Now, the latter is basically a conflict of interest rule, and it could well be sensible. We haven't seen it yet, and I don't want to predict sensibility from the White House, but it could happen, and dealing with conflicts of interest is a traditional gold. But a complete ban on recommendations, I think, raises numerous semantic issues and probably could be easily outflanked. You didn't make a recommendation, you just gave a lot of factual advice that all pointed one way. Okay. That's the proxy advisors, and I think their importance is becoming more important. Okay. Now let's see if I get to the next one. Mirrored voting. Mirrored voting is a term that can be defined very different ways. It does basically mean a system for voting votes that otherwise wouldn't be exercised and using the results of the votes that were cast to establish a ratio that will be applied to those unvoted votes. Okay. Now, some White House advisors have different views of what mirrored voting should do. Okay. Here's probably the most extreme version. It could mean that those beneficial owners who opt out from each of the big three's regular voting program, as they are now permitted to do under the alternative voting systems that each of the big three has now put forward. Well, those who opt out and don't want to have the big three vote for them through their panels would vote on a board nominee, and their vote breakdown would also apply to and override, apparently, the voting decision by the big three member as to the shares that did not opt out. My current understanding, and this may change, is that the level of opt-outs from the big three is relatively low. 22% at BlackRock, down around 10% at State Street. Okay, but look what that means. If, take the hypothetical at State Street, if 90% of the voters of their beneficial owners do not opt out, that might suggest they're not unhappy with State Street. And therefore, to take the vote of those who do opt out, maybe 10% opt out, which is the State Street number, and if they were to split the vote 50-50 or 60-40, you would apply that percentage to all of the beneficial owners represented by State Street. Now that does strike me as prodigiously unwise. It's misguided, and it presents the world in which the tail is allowed to wag the dog, and the tail has a very different texture than the dog does. We're giving no weight in such a case to the fact that the vast majority, may have seemingly expressed either apathy or support for the system used by a company that they did not opt out from. Okay, but that's what those who want the strongest version of mirrored voter would like. Others might say, well, only applied mirrored voting to those people who opt out but still didn't vote. You could have people opting out at 10%, 20%, but maybe only 4 or 5% of the vote isn't cast. And you would vote those shares by looking at the votes that were cast among the opt-outs and apply this only to those opting out. Are less objectionable, but we don't yet know what they mean. Finally, there's this interesting issue. Can the president issue an executive order on how private actors, here the big three, vote their shares in the absence of congressional legislation? Even the SEC would seemingly lack authority to tell the big three how to vote their shares. They could force disclosure of conflicts, I'm sure, but I don't think they have the power to say you must vote your shares according to this ratio based on our fiat. But the current White House thinks you can do almost anything with executive orders, and this will be an interesting question that will come up quite possibly by this time next year. Okay, now let's try one more. Okay. I will probably at this point go no further with this issue and just say that mirrored voting is going to get a lot of attention. You'll find it's defined. You can go to the Dictionary of Financial Information and they'll tell you what it means, but no one knows which version of it is currently being favored by by the lobbyists and various White House officials. And it's a strange coalition because some of my most liberal my friends, including Professor Bebchuk, will do anything to crush the power of the big three. And the power that would thereby result is a tremendous shift of power to Elliott management, which is on the, I say, far right of the various entities. So we have people on both sides, those who want to crush the big three and those who want to, whatever you do, don't give power to Elliott management, but those two go together. Okay. Now at this point, I told people I would be short. I have been short, and I can now get ready to applaud. I can now adjourn us all to the cocktail party and the hors d'oeuvres. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack, and thank you all for coming. As Professor Coffey stated, don't miss our last
The
act,
World Room, right across.
which is a liquid act, and it is directly across the hallway. Thanks a lot for coming and sticking out for the whole day. We'll see you next year.